As I have been preparing for this Yom Kippur, as I have been doing my own soul-searching and accounting, I have thought to speak with you this evening on the evening of Kol Nidrei, on this holy occasion, on three themes, three elements of our faith and identity. Today, I would like to speak with you about self-knowledge, humility, and accountability. I would like to speak with you about egalitarianism and justice. And I would like to speak with you about love, especially today. Especially today, given this unique space that we inhabit at this moment and this very special moment in time. After all, it is Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish year. There really is nothing quite like Yom Kippur. There's nothing quite like the preparation for it and the emotion of this day, especially the Kol Nidrei. We are partaking in an extraordinary ritual together, a Shabbat Shabbaton, a Sabbath of Sabbaths, it says in Leviticus chapter 16, a moment set apart, a kind of a pinnacle. And yet, in the rest of the Bible, for example, in the book of 1 Kings, in chapter 8, we learn that Solomon dedicates the temple on the first day of the month of Tishrei, on the very first day of the year. And then he holds a banquet for 14 days. And if Yom Kippur, according to Mosaic law, occurs 10 days after the new year, after Rosh Hashanah, where was Yom Kippur? Why was it not mentioned? In the listing of the major moments of atonement, of expiation, of forgiveness for sins, by the great prophet Ezekiel, who lived in the 6th century before the Common Era, in chapter 45 of the book of Ezekiel, where is the mention of Yom Kippur? If Yom Kippur is so central, why is it not mentioned there either? Where is it? Why is Yom Kippur absent? And decades later, when Ezra and Nehemiah lead returnees from Babylonia to the land of Israel, to Jerusalem, a small group of returning exiles, the book of Nehemiah, chapter 8, describes the reading of the law by Ezra to the people assembled in Jerusalem. At the very beginning of Tishrei, the very beginning of the year, Ezra reads the Torah to the people. There are translators explaining it to the people. And on the second day, they rediscover the fact that they have a ritual they didn't know about, the ritual of Sukkot, the holiday of the tabernacles. And so chapter 8 of the book of Nehemiah leads us straight from Rosh Hashanah to Sukkot. The people of Israel run out on the second day, collecting branches, preparing themselves for the holiday of Sukkot. Where is Yom Kippur? Where is the Day of Atonement? How is it that it is missing? What about the sacrifices? What about the special functions of the high priest? What about the scapegoat? What about the fasting? The holiest day of the Jewish year. Where is it? We believe we know where the inspiration for Yom Kippur originates. It probably emerges from the New Year rituals of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Imagine the scene for a moment. We are now in the largest city in the world, 6th century before the Common Era. We are in Babylon, a fortified city that is considered impenetrable. The main gate to Babylon allows the water of the Euphrates River to enter into the city without allowing enemy troops to come in. That means the city has a fresh supply of water all the time and cannot be successfully besieged. The city is impenetrable. It contains wonders of the world, including hanging gardens, palaces without equal. The largest city in the world, by now housing approximately 200,000 people, teeming with residents, merchants, pilgrims. A city that by now is more than 1,000 years old. And 4 days following the start of the year, in the midst of the Akitu festival, the New Year festival, the beginning of this New Year festival, which lasts 12 days, following the recitation of the extraordinary Enuma Elish, Babylon's founding myth and poetic recognition of Marduk as the supreme god, a ram is sacrificed in the temple of Nabu. It is sacrificed to cleanse or to wipe the sins and iniquities of the last year. The word in Akkadian for that wiping, that cleansing of the sins is kapuru. Sound familiar? Kapuru, like Kippur. With that cleansing, Babylon is prepared for the year to come. And then on the 5th day, the emperor of Babylon, the most powerful ruler on the face of the earth, the leader of the largest empire, the largest, wealthiest superpower, would enter the temple of Marduk with the high priest. There, the emperor, and imagine now Nebuchadnezzar, the emperor who defeated much of the ancient Near East and conquered Judea and destroyed Jerusalem. There, the enter stands before Marduk, removing his regalia, removing every sign of kingship and of power, to stand a mortal, a vulnerable human before his God. The emperor then is led in making a number of oaths in the presence of the high priest and Marduk, to the effect that he has not relinquished his duties. He has not breached the trust that was entrusted in him, that he acted in the best interests of Babylon and its advancement and its survival. A whole set of oaths that are made by the emperor, now standing naked, human, before Marduk. By the end of this ceremony, the greatest, the most honored leader in the known world undergoes a trial that ends in tears. Tears, the signal of humanity, of vulnerability, of humility. Tears that are greeted with favor by the god Marduk. Then the emperor again wears his royal insignia and steps out of the temple with the high priest, this time holding Marduk's hand, holding the hand of the statue of Marduk, now in the presence of tens of thousands of worshippers and celebrants awaiting all of them outside. Following the Kupuru, following the atonement, the cleansing, the wiping, the expiation of sins through the sacrifice of the ram, and the recommitment now of the emperor to the core values and heritage of Babylon, the year can start with celebration. Here for one moment, at the new year, Marduk and his priesthood remind all of us that all, including the emperor, are human, fallible, and accountable. Yes, even the emperor. Accountability starts at the top. Of course, in the hands of the biblical scribe and redactor, let alone the rabbis who follow them, the rituals of Yom Kippur are not limited to the high and mighty. To this day, every member of the Jewish fold stands facing the Torah scrolls and open ark. We're all called to identify our failings and reflect on the trajectory of our lives, on our Judaism, on our core values, to set an agenda for ourselves, both privately and collectively, for the year to come. For a moment, we all stand here like the emperor of Babylon before our God. This is the primary purpose and meaning of this Kol Nidrei service. So we can only imagine what must have gone through the mind of Rabbi Moses Greece as he stood before the congregation on 55th Street exactly 125 years ago. On the very year 1894-95, he would transform the temple's religious school, opening its doors to all, Jews and non-Jews, members, non-members, turning it within a handful of years into the largest religious school in the country and its most innovative. During this year in which he advocated for and launched the Cleveland Council of Jewish Women, and started considering and sharing with board members the idea of a Temple Women's Association, though that would only be established a few years later in 1897. It was a year for Rabbi Greece of continuous advocacy for the migrant, the needy, and the poor. We can only imagine his thoughts. And women's leadership was a tough issue. On the one hand, the National Council of Jewish Women had just been launched in the World Parliament of Religions meeting in Chicago under the leadership of Hannah Greenebaum Solomon, a Chicagoan, organizer of the Jewish Women's Congress. Women were making their voices heard and stepping up to leadership. It's true. On the other hand, a quiet struggle was taking place among Jewish charitable organizations throughout the country. You see, women had established and led a myriad successful organizations to aid the poor and the needy, to educate and to offer cultural enrichment and support in the integration of immigrants into American society throughout the 19th century, especially from the 1820s onwards. But following the recession of the 1820s and early 30s, there grew a sense that women were uniquely suited to benevolence, to caring, to administering support, rather than the organizational management aspect of life or the making of difficult distributive decisions with regard to resources. From the mid-19th to the late 19th centuries, throughout this country, in Baltimore, in Philadelphia, in New York, in Chicago, in other cities, women's organizations came under pressure to merge with other organizations, including some new communal organizations that would be led by men, so they could offer the care and benevolence that they were so good and uniquely good at offering, and leave some of the difficult decisions to men. Rabbi Moses Gries would have none of it. Rabbi Gries would emerge a true egalitarian, a believer in the ability of women to administer benevolence and to lead and direct resources, an ally and advocate, and a believer in the transformative effort to help the needy and less fortunate through both men and women's organizations. His actions 125 years ago should not go unnoticed and cannot be taken for granted. They spoke loudly of his values. And in one of his celebrated addresses on the needs of the poor, he said, "The problem of charity," and here in this address, he meant both the charities that were addressed by men and women's organizations. "The problem of charity," he wrote, "is the problem of justice. The poor need not alms, but justice. Let us right the wrongs, the inequalities, the injustices, and the oppression of the poor. One thing and only one will solve the problem of poverty," he said. "I have faith in one mighty idea, in one all-conquering principle. I have abiding faith in justice." And then he said, "The problems of the poor need you. If ever the same commanding ability, the same wonderful genius for organization, the same tireless and unceasing energy which have revolutionized commerce and industry were applied to the problems of the poor, we would destroy the shame of our great cities, the tenements and the slums." The words of Rabbi Moses Gries. It should come as no surprise that members of the organizations that Gries founded and advanced would also become advocates and activists for another cause of justice: women's suffrage. The arc of continuous engagement that Rabbi Gries set on course would lead to the transformation that occurred 100 years ago this year, the passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1919-1920. Sadly, Rabbi Gries did not see that victory. He did not live to see that day. Yet this we know: Justice and egalitarianism were at the very core of Greece's Judaism and of his civic advocacy. Still on the subject of women's leadership, today we especially remember the courage and conviction of Livia Koralik. Later on in her life, she would be known as Hannah Siegel. Koralik was born in Győr in Hungary and was 23 years old, having been arrested, placed in a ghetto, deported to Auschwitz, and then to a women's labor camp in Parsnitz in the late summer of 1944. On the evening of Kol Nidre, 75 years ago today, she was asked to deliver a sermon to other women inmates. And she said the following: I ask on behalf of all of us, of the Holy One, blessed be He, to forgive us, for we have transgressed, we have betrayed, we have misappropriated, we have spoken ill, we offended parents, we hurt our relatives, siblings, and friends. We hurt them because we are flesh and blood, because our evil inclination stuck with us and swayed us, directed us off the path of justice and equity. We ask the Holy One, blessed be He, to forgive us in the name of our loved ones, for we are set apart from all our beloved and cannot ask them directly for forgiveness. Now that we are so far removed, we are deeply pained by the hurt we caused them. We ask from God that He hear our pleas and that He hear the prayers of mothers and feel the anguish of their missing their babies and young children. That God may hear the prayers of women who wish to see their husbands and the young who wish to experience their families yet again, their mother, their father, their grandfather and grandmother. We promise to be good and just. True, this is not so easy because we are all downtrodden, hungry, and we are cold. But I remember our holy and heroic rabbi in Győr before the transport to Auschwitz. He gathered us on the Sabbath on a plot in the ghetto, and there he spoke about love. The love of one human being toward another, saying that as much as you may offer to another, there always remains more in one's heart. I remember his last sermon, she said. So he said, it is not God, the Makom, who sanctifies humanity, but humanity that sanctifies God. And so, I ask you today to unleash some more of our love. Remember those who could not, cannot hug a loved one, a parent, a significant other, a sibling, a grandparent. Consider our many blessings, our comforts, our gifts. Tell those special people you hold in your hearts that you love them. Give an extra hug. Let us not be blind to the suffering that surrounds us. The world needs more compassion and love. Let us think about love and ask what it would mean for us to act out of love. Let it be said of each and every one of us that at special moments we demonstrated the human capacity for the sanctification of God. You see, self-knowledge, humility and accountability, egalitarianism and justice, and love are what we are about. Let these guide our paths towards a good, sweet year, toward the realization of our potentials, and toward the enhancement of others' ability to flourish. We can do this. We can do this together. May this be our will and God's will. And let us say, Amen.